The morning of the rehearsal dinner, Robert told me I wasn't enough. Not in those exact words, of course. He was too well-bred for that. Too diplomatic after years of navigating his family's expectations. But the meaning was clear enough when he suggested, yet again, that maybe I should reconsider my wardrobe choices, soften my accent, perhaps mention my volunteer work more prominently than my actual career. "They just need time to warm up to you, Emma," he said, adjusting his tie in the mirror of our hotel suite. "You know how traditional they are." Traditional. That was the word he always used, as if tradition justified his mother's pursed lips every time I spoke, his father's dismissive questions about my little job, his sister Caroline's barely concealed sneers at my off-the-rack dresses and drugstore makeup. I'd spent 6 months trying to fit into the Sterling family mold, compressing myself into something smaller, quieter, more palatable, and still it wasn't enough. I watched Robert in the mirror, this man I'd agreed to marry, and felt something inside me finally snap. Not dramatically, not with anger or tears, just a quiet, definitive crack, like ice breaking on a frozen lake. "You're right," I said calmly. "They do need time." He brightened immediately, relief flooding his handsome features. "I knew you'd understand. Tonight will be better, I promise. Just try to—" "I'll be myself. Completely myself." Something flickered in his eyes, maybe uncertainty, but he was already late for the golf outing with his father and future brothers-in-law. He kissed my cheek, a perfunctory gesture that barely registered, and left me alone with my thoughts and a closet full of clothes I'd bought trying to please people who would never be pleased. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long moment, staring at my phone. Then I made a call I should have made months ago. "Aunt Philippa, it's Emma. I need to ask you something." My great-aunt's warm laugh crackled through the line from Monte Carlo. "Darling girl, I was wondering when you'd finally ring. I've been reading about this wedding in the society pages. The Sterlings are very impressed with themselves, aren't they?" You have no idea. I took a deep breath. "Aunt Phil, I need a favor. Rather a large one. Name it. I need you to come to my rehearsal dinner tonight, and I need you to bring the full security detail." There was a pause. Then another laugh, this one delighted. "Oh, Emma, you've been hiding from them, haven't you? They have no idea." "None whatsoever." "About time they learned, then. Give me the address. We'll be there at 7 sharp." After we hung up, I opened my suitcase and pulled out the garment bag I had hidden at the bottom, the one containing the dress I'd actually wanted to wear. Champagne silk that draped like water, deceptively simple but unmistakably expensive, the kind of dress that whispered old money rather than screaming it. I'd bought it months ago, before I'd started second-guessing everything about myself, and then hidden it away when Caroline had made a cutting remark about trying too hard. I laid it on the bed and called the hotel spa. "This is Emma Chen in the presidential suite. I'd like to book your best stylist for this afternoon. Hair and makeup. Yes, I know it's last minute. Thank you." Then I ordered room service. Oysters, champagne, chocolate-covered strawberries, and ran myself a bath. If this was going to be my last night as Marcus Sterling's fiancé, and I was increasingly certain it would be, I was going to enjoy it. By 6:30, I was ready. The hotel stylist had understood the assignment perfectly. Elegant, sophisticated, with just enough edge to make it clear I wasn't trying to blend in anymore. My black hair fell in glossy waves past my shoulders, my makeup was flawless but bold, red lips that commanded attention, and the dress fit like it had been made for me, which, in a sense, it had. I looked in the mirror and saw myself for the first time in months. Not Marcus's fiancé, not the woman trying desperately to earn the Sterling family's approval. Just Emma Chen, 32 years old, successful in her own right, and done apologizing for who she was. My phone buzzed. A text from Aunt Philippa. "Downstairs, ready when you are." I smiled, grabbed my clutch, and headed for the elevator. The lobby of the five-star hotel was busy with the usual evening crowd, but I noticed when things shifted. Heads turning, conversations pausing, a ripple of attention that followed me across the marble floor, or rather followed the 6 imposing figures in dark suits who fell into formation around me as I approached the entrance. Aunt Philippa stood by the Rolls-Royce, resplendent in emerald Chanel, her silver hair swept up in an elegant chignon. She was 78 and looked like she could buy and sell half the hotel's guests without blinking, which, to be fair, she probably could. "Emma, darling," she embraced me warmly. "You look absolutely radiant. Are you ready to make an entrance?" "More than ready." "Good girl," she patted my hand. "Your mother would be so proud. She never liked it when you dimmed your light for anyone." My throat tightened. My mother had passed away 5 years ago, but Aunt Phil was right. She would have hated seeing me shrink myself down, trying to fit into Marcus's world. The drive to the Sterling family estate took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of Aunt Phil filling me in on the latest family news, the upcoming charity gala she was chairing, and the rather scandalous affair happening in our Monaco branch of the family. She made it all sound so normal, so mundane, that I almost forgot we were arriving with a security detail that would make most heads of state jealous. Almost. The Sterling estate sprawled across 50 manicured acres in Connecticut's Gold Coast, all rolling lawns and old-growth trees, with a mansion that had been in the family for 4 generations. Marcus had grown up here, learning to sail and play polo and do whatever other obscenely wealthy East Coast families did. He'd always made it sound so impressive, so intimidating. Looking at it now through the tinted windows of a Rolls-Royce, flanked by bodyguards, it just looked like a very large house. We pulled up the circular drive precisely at 7. The other guests were already inside. I could see them through the massive windows, champagne flutes in hand, laughing and socializing. Robert's mother, Victoria Sterling, held court near the fireplace in what I'm sure was vintage Valentino. His father, Charles, stood with a group of men who all looked like they'd gone to the same prep school and never quite left. Caroline was there too, elegant in cold and navy blue, her hedge fund manager husband at his side. And Robert, standing near the French doors, checking his watch, probably wondering where I was and hoping I hadn't done anything to embarrass him. The car stopped. One of the security team, Hans, I thought his name was, opened my door. "Ready, Miss Chen?" I stepped out into the evening air, and it was like someone had pressed pause on a movie. Through the windows, I watched as every head turned toward the driveway, watched as the circle of security formed around Aunt Philippa and me, professional and imposing, watched as Victoria Sterling's champagne flute stopped halfway to her lips. Aunt Philippa linked her arm through mine. "Shall we?" The front door was opened by a butler who couldn't quite hide his surprise at our entourage. We swept into the entrance hall, all marble and crystal chandelier, and the security team flanked us perfectly. Not threatening, but undeniably present. Victoria recovered first, her society training kicking in, even as confusion flickered across her face. "Emma, how lovely to see you. And you've brought guests?" "My great-aunt, Philippa Chen-Montgomery," I said smoothly. "Aunt Phil, this is Robert's mother, Victoria Sterling." I watched Victoria's face as she processed the name. Chen-Montgomery. The Chen-Montgomery family, with their shipping empire and real estate holdings across 3 continents, the Chen-Montgomerys who regularly appeared in the Financial Times and whose charitable foundation was one of the largest in the world. That Chen-Montgomery. "How do you do?" Aunt Philippa said graciously, extending her hand. "Emma has told me so much about your family. I do hope you don't mind me crashing your lovely dinner. I was in New York for business and simply had to see my great-niece." "Of course. We're delighted," Victoria managed, her eyes darting between Aunt Phil, me, and the security team. "Though I must admit, Emma never mentioned she had family in shipping, is it?" "Among other things," Aunt Phil said airily. "The family business is so dreadfully boring, don't you think? Emma was quite right to pursue her own interests. We're very proud of her work in sustainable architecture, so much more meaningful than simply inheriting wealth, wouldn't you say? The barb landed perfectly. Caroline had never worked a day in her life, and everyone in the room knew it. Robert appeared at my elbow, his face a mixture of confusion and something that might be dawning horror. Emma, what's going on? Who are all these people? Security, I said simply. Aunt Phil never travels with them. Surely your mother can relate. I gestured vaguely at the Sterling Mansion's obvious security system, although I suppose your family's precautions are a bit more discreet. Charles Sterling materialized, clearly the designated crisis manager. Mr. Chen-Montgomery, is it? I don't believe we've had the pleasure. There is no Mr. Chen-Montgomery currently. I've outlived 3 husbands, I'm afraid, but please do call me Philippa. We're practically family, after all. She beamed at Robert, who looked like he might be physically ill. You must be Emma's young man. How lovely to finally meet you. Emma's been so secretive about this whole courtship. I told her, darling, you simply must let us meet the boy, but she insisted on keeping you all to herself. I could feel Robert staring at me, questions radiating off him in waves, but I kept my attention on Aunt Phil, who was in full performance mode now. The security might seem excessive, she continued, addressing Victoria, but after that incident in Hong Kong last year, the family insisted. Such a bother, but one must be careful. You understand, I'm sure. Victoria nodded mutely, though I was certain she had no idea what incident Aunt Phil was referring to, mostly because there hadn't been one. But it sounded impressive, and that was the point. Dinner was announced, and we moved into the formal dining room. The Sterling family's carefully curated seating arrangement had been thrown into chaos by our arrival, and I watched with quiet satisfaction as Victoria frantically consulted with the butler, trying to figure out where to put on Phil that would be appropriately respectful of her obvious status. They settled on placing her at Charles's right hand, the position of honor, which meant I ended up across from Robert rather than beside him. Perfect. I could watch his face as the full reality of the situation dawned on him. Throughout the first course, Aunt Phil regaled the table with stories of Monaco, of charity galas and art auctions and casual name-dropping that would have seemed gauche coming from anyone else, but somehow sounded perfectly natural from her. She mentioned the family's foundation, our holdings in Singapore and London, the new hospital wing we were funding in Shanghai. Every mention was like watching someone inflate a balloon, and I could see the Sterling family reassessing everything they thought they knew about me. The little job in architecture was actually a position at one of the most prestigious sustainable design firms in New York. The volunteer work I did wasn't just weekend charity, it was serving on the board of our family foundation, overseeing grants worth millions. The modest apartment in Brooklyn I'd always downplayed was paid for in cash, not because I couldn't afford Manhattan, but because I preferred the neighborhood. Victoria kept glancing at me with a new expression I couldn't quite read. Calculation, maybe, or regret. Caroline had gone completely silent, her earlier smugness evaporated. But it was Robert's face I couldn't stop watching. Confusion gave way to understanding, and understanding to something that looked uncomfortably like betrayal. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked quietly during the main course, leaning across the table. "About your family." I took a sip of wine, considering my answer. "I did tell you, multiple times. You never asked follow-up questions. You said your family was in shipping." "We are." "Emma," his voice dropped lower, "you know what I mean. You let me think. I let you think what you wanted to think," I interrupted. "You assumed I came from nothing because I didn't show up dripping in logos and name-dropping destinations. You assumed my job was cute and unimportant because it wasn't finance or law. You assumed I needed to change myself to fit into your world." I set down my wine glass. I never needed your world, Marcus. You needed to believe I did.
His face flushed. That's not fair. Isn't it? I gestured subtly around the table. Look at your mother. Look at Caroline. 6 months ago, I wasn't good enough to marriage into the Sterling family. Tonight, I'm suddenly fascinating because Aunt Phil showed up with bodyguards. Nothing about me has changed except your perception. It's not like that. It's exactly like that. I felt surprisingly calm, surprisingly certain. You told me this morning I wasn't enough for your family. You've been telling me that in 100 different ways for months. And I believed you. I tried to make myself smaller, quieter, more acceptable. But here's the thing I finally realized. I was always enough. Your family just couldn't see it because they were too busy looking down. Victoria's voice cut through our whispered conversation. Emma, dear, your aunt was just telling us about the Chen-Montgomery scholarship program. How wonderful that you're so involved in philanthropy. You must tell us more about it. The same woman who 3 days ago had suggested I might be, quote, marrying above my station, unquote. I smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach my eyes. Actually, Victoria, I think I've said everything I need to say tonight. I stood, and immediately the security team shifted, ready to move with me. Aunt Phil caught my eye and gave me the smallest nod of approval. Thank you for dinner, I said, addressing the table. It's been incredibly illuminating. Robert, I'll collect my things from the hotel tomorrow. I think it's best if I make other arrangements for tonight. Emma, wait. Robert stood too, reaching for my arm. I stepped back, and Hans was suddenly there. Not threatening, just present. Robert's hand dropped. I should have done this months ago, I said, and I realized I wasn't angry, just tired. Tired of pretending, tired of shrinking, tired of apologizing for who I was. You wanted someone you could mold into the perfect Sterling wife. But I'm not Clay. I'm not a project. I'm just Emma, and I'm finally okay with that being enough. I pulled off the engagement ring, 3 carats, princess cut, chosen by his mother, and set it gently on the table. Goodbye, Robert. I hope you find someone who fits better into your world, someone who doesn't mind making themselves smaller to make you feel bigger. The walk to the door felt like miles, but Aunt Phil was beside me, her hand warm on my arm, and the security team moved around us like a well-choreographed dance. Behind us, I could hear the eruption of voices, Victoria's sharp tone, Robert calling my name. I didn't look back. In the car, Aunt Phil squeezed my hand. You know, darling, your mother did the exact same thing to your father when they were engaged. He came from old money, very concerned with appearances. She walked away and never regretted it for a moment. Met your father 6 months later at a conference in Beijing. He loved her exactly as she was. I didn't know that. She wanted you to figure it out for yourself, but I think she'd be very pleased with how tonight went. Aunt Phil smiled. Though I must say, the security team was a nice touch. Very dramatic. I laughed. Really laughed for the first time in months. I learned from the best. So what now? I looked out the window at the Connecticut countryside rolling past, lit by the setting sun. Now I go back to New York, back to my work, back to my life, the life I had before I tried to twist myself into someone I'm not. And if he comes after you? I thought about Robert, about the look on his face when I walked away, about whether he was capable of seeing past his family's expectations to who I actually was. Then he comes after me as Emma Chen, not as whoever he wanted me to be. And if he can't do that, then he doesn't come at all. Aunt Phil nodded approvingly. Good girl. Now, let's go back to the city. I'm taking you to dinner at that little French place you love, and we're ordering the most expensive bottle of champagne they have. We're celebrating. Celebrating what? She looked at me with warm, knowing eyes. Celebrating you finding yourself again, darling. That's always worth champagne. As Manhattan's skyline came into view, glittering with promise and possibility, I felt something I hadn't felt in 6 months. Free. Free to be loud or quiet, successful or struggling, perfect or flawed. Free to be enough, exactly as I was. The Bodyguards had been Aunt Phil's idea, but the courage to walk away had been entirely mine. And that, I thought, was worth more than any engagement ring, any family approval, any relationship built on me being less than I was. I was Emma Chen. I was an architect, a philanthropist, someone's great niece, and my mother's daughter. I was complicated and creative and sometimes too blunt for polite society. I was exactly enough. And more than that, I was finally ready to believe it. The rest, I thought, as the city lights grew brighter, would figure itself out. And if it didn't, well, that would be enough too.